Good morning and welcome to the Farm Show on Westplex Talk 1045. I am your host, John Combest, and it is Saturday, February 28th, 2026. Before I forget, I should point out something that was pointed out to me by our station owner, Brad Hildebrand. Brad mentioned this yesterday on our weekday morning talk show, the Brad and John Show, heard right here on Westplex Talk 1045 from 7 a.m. to 8 a.m. Monday through Friday. Brad offered me a tremendous suggestion, which was on the Farm Show to point out that not only does this show run Saturday at 10 a.m., its regular time, but there's also a replay on Sunday at 8 a.m. So I will be reminding us of that every segment as we go forward today. Now, I'll tell you one thing we've never done on the Farm Show in our 7 glorious months on the air, and that is a best of show. Well, to paraphrase Marilyn Monroe, we have the 7-month itch. Today, we are going to play some of the very best interviews that we've done since our debut last summer. And in A Block, our first segment, we're going to start off talking about water rights. We had State Representative Cameron Parker on last summer to discuss that issue. In B Block, we're going to hear select clips from Missouri Agriculture Director Chris Chen. She was the very first guest ever on the Farm Show. In B Block, we'll also hear from Greenfield Robotics, a little bit about robotic weed control. And in C Block, we're going to focus on education. One of my favorite guests, Kaylin Beatty, she'll be talking a little bit about ag education in the classroom, and we'll also hear from the Missouri Beef Industry Council about their Beef in the Classroom program. As a reminder, you can find all of our previous episodes by going to YouTube and searching for Farm Show Radio. Or you can go to youtube.com and look for the user at Farm Show Radio. Let's start off with that Cameron Parker interview. We'll get right into it. State Representative Cameron Parker from Campbell, Missouri. Welcome to the Farm Show.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Now, for folks who are driving around here in our 4-county area, up here in Franklin County, Warren County, St. Charles County, and West St. Louis County, so that we can visualize a little bit better, can you tell us where Campbell, Missouri is?
So Campbell, Missouri is in the Boot Hill of Missouri. So and it is in the Boot Hill on the western side, just almost probably 8 miles, 7 miles from the Arkansas state line.
So you're
So
dangerously close to Arkansas.
Yeah, it's a stone's throw away.
And can you tell us, too, what crops do you grow down there?
Yeah, we grow corn, we grow soybeans, rice, and cotton.
Yeah, we're a few degree days shy of that up here in our area. And I wish we had, not in the summer, I wish we didn't have that heat, but I wish we had a few more degree days to grow some cotton. But I want to get into the most important thing that we'll discuss today. As I mentioned 2 weeks ago, we made reference to the Water Preservation Act. Can you tell us what the Water Preservation Act is and how that legislation came to be?
Yeah, certainly. So this was the Water Preservation Act was legislation that was passed this year and signed into law by Governor Mike Kehoe. And what it does is it makes it unlawful for any person to export water resources outside the state unless the person holds a water exportation permit. So it's establishing a framework for exportation of bulk water. And what the goal or the aim is of this is to preserve Missouri's water resources. Several times throughout this process, I heard that how much our water in the state of Missouri, how much the abundancy of water that we have. But really, the phrase I heard the most is that water is the new oil.
Yeah, I mean, especially when you look at some of our brethren in other parts of the country that are dealing with diminishing aquifers and a lot less access to that water. Now, how would folks go about getting a permit?
So what would happen? So the legislation sets up kind of, like I said, the framework. So the Department of Natural Resources, it will create the rules. They will create the water exportation permits, which is an application process through the DNR. It will have to there'll be information that will be provided, what is needed, and then like a public notice or comment section for Missourians to weigh in on how our water is being exported. But that will be an application process through the DNR.
And there will eventually, as you mentioned, there will eventually be opportunities for folks to weigh in on the law, right? As part of the lawmaking, or I should say rulemaking process, right?
Absolutely. So there's a like a 30-day window to submit public comments. But if this is affecting you or someone close to you, your area, your land, then you will have the opportunity to have a public comment. And we think that's very important. I think that's very important to allow Missourians to weigh in on how their water is being used.
And in terms of just the nuts and bolts of the legislation, you had a Senate sponsor of this legislation too, right? Who was that?
Yes, that was Senator Jamie Berger from Scott County, Missouri,
Okay, so we
which
had
is just a little north and I'm sorry.
no, go
And
ahead.
I think they grow a little cotton up there as well. So
They sure do. Yeah, and so we had two boot heel leaders down there running that, right?
that's correct.
So oftentimes with legislation, authors of the legislation and sponsors of the legislation don't get 100% of what they want. Maybe the first time there's a go round, maybe there's some negotiations and they have to give a little, take a little. Is there anything about your final bill that you'd like to tweak in the coming years?
You know, at this point, I don't anticipate any changes to this legislation or this bill. I mean, but that being said, as we work through this implementation process, I'm always open to revisiting areas that may need clarification or adjustment. Good policy requires both structure and flexibility, and, I'm committed to making sure that this law works effectively in practice. So this is something that as we go forward, we will continue to review. But right, as it sits right now, nothing that I want to change.
Okay. So when you think about what success looks like for this, how will you know a year from now, 5 years from now, maybe 10 years down the road? How will you know if this legislation was successful?
I think the success of this legislation will be maintaining the abundant water resources that we currently have right now. So, what we're trying to do is prevent misuse of our resources. And as other states are looking to kind of take advantage of our resources as they're depleting aquifers, continue to dwindle, I think they will look to us. And the success is that we prevent misuse.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. What, I'm sure you had a number of stakeholders that weighed in on this, and I know that you held committee hearings on this. You had plenty of floor debate on the topic, and you had a diverse set of voices weigh in. What did you learn about water rights when you went through this process?
I learned a ton about water rights. I was fairly familiar with Missouri's riparian water rights and our reasonable use, but I learned about our rights as the state of Missouri. I learned about other water rights in other states and how there are lots and lots of case law about water rights, and I learned about one thing that I was kind of shocked about is all of the pending litigation in between other states. Like currently, Nebraska and Colorado have a pending lawsuit about the Southern Platte River that crosses back and forth. So, learned a lot about the active disputes going on out west specifically.
Is there anything that Missouri can or should do in that vein to protect its water rights? Like you mentioned the dispute between those states. Is there anything lawmakers could do to prevent something like that, or is that one of the things that this bill does?
That is exactly what this bill does is prevents western states or other states the potential of that happening where they come in and try to deplete our water resources, our natural resources.
I see what you mean. Now, are there any misperceptions that you hear about access to water or water rights or general water utilities that you've seen or heard that you consistently need to correct? Or are there any other misperceptions about water rights that you've encountered?
Well, as I kind of had spoken earlier, a lot of times the misperception that I heard this particular time was that water disputes don't happen here. That's out west. We don't have an issue. We don't have to really worry about that right now. And I disagree. I mean, I think Missouri's taking proactive steps to protect our water resources. Also, initially when this bill was first filed, it was kind of named the Water Exportation Bill. Well, that is that is not what this is doing. This is not an avenue to mass export water, bulk water. This is a bill to preserve our water. And so that was one of the biggest things that we had to tackle initially.
I can imagine someone reading Water Exportation Act, particularly if you're a little bit, leaning toward the conspiracy theorist side, and you would think, what in the world are our legislators trying to do, export our water?
Right, and that's not the aim. That is not the goal. We're trying to protect our water resources.
So to sum up, in short, DNR will begin issuing some sort of draft rules, and folks will be able to weigh in on those. I'm guessing Missouri DNR would probably be the best source of information going forward, right?
That's correct. Yes, sir.
And if folks want to learn a little bit more, or if folks want to contact you, what's the best way to get in contact with you?
They can call me, and I can provide you that number. Also, they can email me, and really email would probably be the best. And it's Cameron.Parker@house.mo.gov.
Well, thank you for that. And we could hear, and we heard 2 weeks ago from Governor Kehoe about exactly how important this legislation is to farmers. It turns out that it was quite a good year for not just groups like the Missouri Farm Bureau or Missouri Soybean, but really folks who need access to better healthcare plans and folks who are concerned with maintaining their water. So we appreciate you coming on, Representative Parker, and talking about this legislation.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, that was State Representative Cameron Parker, a Republican from Campbell, Missouri. And while we're on the topic of water and defending Missouri's water, this week on the Brad and John Show, which you can hear from 7 to 8 a.m. on Westplex Talk 1045, we talked about an important piece of legislation, a first draft, if you will, that addresses some of the controversy around data centers and water. Have a listen. Pop quiz about a quote. Who said this? It's multiple choice. This is the best arrow in the quiver. It has a lot of urgency. Is it A, the Indians to each other when they were attacking Meriwether Lewis on the crap transmitter site grounds? Is it B, Brad to his wife the night they conceived their fourth and final child? That was the best arrow in the quiver. Is it C, the old man in the Schnucks parking lot rearing back to hit Brad in the face earlier this week? Or is it D, none of the above?
I'd say is E, all of the above. How's that?
It's all the above. Brad, I'll give you the answer while you go skedaddle, okay?
Okay, I'll go check the recorder.
The correct answer is D, none of the above, because it's actually a quote from State Representative Colin Wellenkamp of St. Charles. And he had a press conference along with a few of his other colleagues to talk about data center regulation and water regulation. Now, we should note that Mr. Wellenkamp also serves as the executive director of the Mississippi River Cities and Towns Initiative. It's a bipartisan group of folks that get together to talk about water issues. So Representative Wellenkamp is uniquely positioned to talk about water issues here. And in all of the hubbub that we've seen in communities across Missouri, but especially here in the Westplex about whether or not to have data centers, one of the concerns has been water regulation. Now, I have a few pieces up today, one from St. Louis Public Radio, one from the Jefferson City News Tribune. I'll read one from KOMU, which is in mid-Missouri. Representatives spoke in a news conference at the Missouri Capitol on Wednesday to outline their proposals for artificial intelligence infrastructure in the state. I guess that's probably just a fancy way of saying data centers. State Reps Colin Wellenkamp, Mike Costello, Scott Miller, and George Haruza all spoke at the news conference. And we would note here that Mr. Haruza is from kind of the mid-county area, but Wellenkamp, Costello, and Miller are from St. Charles County. Wellenkamp and Costello proposed a bill that are intended to create economic growth through AI databases while ensuring large industrial users of electricity and water will not negatively affect Missouri residents. Both bills have been read twice, with the most recent reading on Monday. So what it comes down to is if you're building a big data center in the St. Louis area, or actually I should say anywhere in Missouri, you would have to show that you are not going to have a negative impact on water use in that community. Another quote from Wellenkamp, this one via Sarah Kellogg of St. Louis Public Radio. If your facility is going to use more than 2 million gallons of fresh water per day, which is a lot, or 80% of the available capacity in that locality, you have to seek a DNR permit to do that. So in the big picture of all this, besides when you get past the DNR permitting process, it's really a case of we have a whole lot of emotions in these districts, in these localities, in these municipalities about water use, about electricity use, about noise. Residents have valid concerns. And I think they feel like they don't want to get steamrolled, whether it's by Google and Meta, whether it's by Amazon, whether it's by Ameren, who frankly they're probably already sick of with these rate increases. So we have, amidst all the hubbub, some state legislators going out there and actually putting pen to paper, or I guess we should say mouse to Word document, and actually trying to build a plan to protect water and energy resources. Now, pardon me, I will say that KOMU did a good job of also reaching across the aisle to the Democrat side. They interviewed a gentleman named Marty Joe Murray, who's from the St. Louis area. And Marty Joe said, hey, I think this is a good start by the Republicans, but we're eventually going to need more regulation. All right, we're going to have to leave it there for now. That was a clip from the Brad and John Show, which you can hear from 7 to 8 a.m. right here on Westplex Talk. When we come back in B Block for February 28th, 2026, robots for weed control? And also Missouri's Department of Agriculture. You are listening to the best of the Farm Show on Westplex Talk 104.5.